A huge crocodile got stuck in a fishing net, and instead of coming to its rescue, some fishermen simply watched as the poor animal started to drown. What happens next is so emotional that it will leave you speechless. The water churned violently, sending ripples across the muddy riverbank. In the shallows, a massive crocodile thrashed, its muscular tail whipping the surface into a frenzy. But this wasn't a predator's attack, it was desperation. Thick strands of fishing net were wrapped around its snout, neck and legs, cutting deep into the scales. Every twist only tightened at the trap. The once feared king of the river was now helpless. Villagers gathered at a distance, whispering nervously. A trapped crocodile isn't any less dangerous, in fact. Pain and fear make it unpredictable. One wrong move could trigger a deadly strike. The elder stepped forward, his eyes locked on the reptile. "If we wait, it will die," he said. "But to save it, we risk our own lives." The decision was instant. They would try. One of the bravest men, a seasoned fisherman who knew the river's secrets, nodded curtly, adjusting the bamboo pole slung over his shoulder. Without a word, he waded into the water. Each step sent out circles that widened, disturbing the silt and clouding the depths. The crocodile's yellow eyes tracked him, unblinking. It jerked violently, the net pulling tighter around its jaw. The sound of the rope cutting into flesh made the crowd gasp. Another man joined, carrying a long bamboo pole to keep the animal's head pressed down. The crocodile thrashed again, tail smashing into the pole with a crack. The force nearly knocked the rescuer off balance. Every so often, the beast would rise, its jaws agape, revealing rows of sharp, yellow teeth. With a snort, it would disappear back into the murky water, only to resurface moments later, more determined than before. Its struggles were weakening, and the water was turning a deeper red. The sight of blood spurred the men on. Minutes felt like hours. Sweat dripped into the rescuer's eyes as they worked, blades sawing carefully at the tangled mess. The net was old, frayed, and embedded deep. It refused to come free. One of the men cried out, drawing back his arm with a jerk. The net had snagged his shirt, tearing it and leaving a gash across his chest. The other man grunted in response, pressing his foot against the shifting silt, keeping himself steady as he grunted and strained against the weight of the pole. He could feel the crocodile's desperate struggle through its connection to the net and the pole. Finally, he called out to his companions, relief edging into his voice. A third villager approached from the side, grabbing the tail to limit movement. The crocodile exploded in power, lifting its head just enough to snap its jaws. The sound echoed like breaking wood. The bamboo pole held barely. For a moment, the trapped beast hung suspended between hope and despair. Then, with a Herculean effort, the rescuers managed to slice through another section of the net. The lines came loose, cascading down in a tangled heap. The crowd on the bank held their breath. This time, the crocodile didn't thrash. Instead, it seemed to hesitate, its movements sluggish. The men saw their chance. Pulling at the loose strands, they worked faster now, adrenaline masking the throbbing in their muscles and the cuts on their hands. Finally, the last knot was cut. For a moment, the reptile stayed still, as if unsure it was truly free. Then, in a blur of muscle, it lunged forward, splashing the rescuers with a wall of cold water before vanishing into the dark river. Silence hung over the bank. The villagers stood frozen, hearts pounding. Some were bruised and bleeding. One man's foot slashed, another's arm scratched raw. None of them noticed the blood trickling down their faces. All eyes were glued to the spot where the crocodile had disappeared. It was a strange mix of awe and disbelief that held them there. They had risked their lives not to kill a dangerous predator, but to give it back its freedom. When they finally broke the silence, it was the elder who spoke first, his voice raspy with emotion. "We gave it back its life," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. It was a simple statement, yet it echoed with the weight of what they had done. They had faced down death and given life back to something that could have easily taken it away. As the sun began its slow dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the villagers slowly dispersed. Each one of them carried a piece of that day's events in their hearts. A reminder that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not with weapons, but with courage and mercy. The days following the rescue were quieter than usual in the village. The incident with the crocodile seemed to hang in the air, unspoken yet ever present. The villagers went about their daily routines, fishing, farming, trading. But a shadow of that day's events lingered over everything. Then, as if nudged by an invisible hand, the stories began to emerge. Whispers at first, then murmurs, then full-throated tales that carried beyond the river and the hills. People traveled from distant villages to hear the tale of the men who dared to defy the jaws of death. And the elder, stoic and calm, would recount the events of that fateful day. But it wasn't just the story that drew them in. It was the spirit of it, the courage that shone brighter than any fear, the compassion that echoed louder than any roar. For in the heart of every person, there's a flicker of understanding, a knowing that sometimes the most formidable opponents aren't beasts, but the limitations of their own minds. In the quiet moments, when the wind rustled through the leaves and the river flowed like a lullaby, the villagers would remember the metallic glint of the knife in the fading light, the rasping breaths, the taut muscles, the silent understanding that bound them together. They had faced down a monster not just because it was a threat, but because it was alive, and in doing so, they had discovered a strength within themselves that mirrored the untamed spirit of the river. A strength born of necessity, tempered by fear, and fueled by an unwavering resolve. Their hands, calloused and strong, had known the sting of the net as much as the feel of the oar. Their eyes, sharp and clear, had seen the panic in the beast's eyes as well as the determination in their own reflections. Each scar, each bruise became a badge of honor, a testament to the day they chose life over fear, courage over caution. They had not tamed the river, nor had they subjugated the wild. Instead, they had found a harmony between their world and the one that lay beyond. A world of untamed spirits and untrodden paths. It was a lesson learned not in books, but in the crucible of that moment when humanity and nature stood face to face, and the villagers had chosen to look beyond the teeth and claws and had seen a soul. At the end of the day, danger isn't always the enemy. Fear can make us destroy what we should protect. Strength is knowing when to stand your ground, and when to let life go. This encounter changed them, not just as individuals, but as a community, forging a bond that transcended their everyday lives, linking them to each other and to the wild expanse that surrounded them. That night, as the moon cast its silvery glow over the river, the villagers gathered once more, not out of necessity, but out of choice. They shared stories, sang songs, and for the first time in a long while, they truly saw each other. Not just as neighbors or acquaintances, but as brothers and sisters who had stared into the abyss and emerged stronger. They were the people of the riverbend, and their tale was a whisper on the wind, a ripple on the water, a testament to the day they saved the crocodile and in doing so, saved a part of themselves. Subscribe, like, and comment on Jungle Echoes, Rescue and Mystery, because the next story you watch could be the one that changes the way you see the wild.